We're here today to once again head off being used as canaries in the proverbial coal mine. If I'd wanted to be a bird, I'd grow feathers. Fortunately for me and for all of us, we don't have to. We actually have NICOSH. The New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health has for more than 30 years been in the forefront of advocacy for worker health and safety and in the fight for safer working conditions. This week's tragic news from Bangladesh really reminds us of the centrality of worker safety to a civilized society. NICOSH has been an essential part of keeping New York State a civilized place, particularly in this globalized economy. Founded by health and safety activists, among them scientists, academics, doctors, lawyers, and trade unionists, in the mid to late 70s in response to passage of the new Federal Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1970, they wanted to ensure the new law provided the strongest possible protections to ordinary workers. And over the years, NICOSH has trained tens of thousands of workers in New York City, Long Island, and Hudson Valley. They've built coalitions of community, environmental, and labor organizations, conducted conferences on workers' compensation, asbestos, diesel fumes in transportation, ergonomics, immigrant workers, the list goes on. And they've provided technical assistance on issues ranging from the aftermath of a wastewater treatment plant explosion to lab safety in schools. And they've also testified many times on congressional hearings on OSHA standards and at city council hearings on a variety of subjects. And after 9/11, NICOSH was an organizational leader in the effort to educate the public and rescue workers about hazardous exposures in Lower Manhattan and provided experts for numerous 9/11 health panels. And most recently, after Hurricane Sandy, they again provided technical assistance, training, and fact sheets on the cleanup of mold and sewage contamination for cleanup workers. Just a quick note, just so you know, this is very personal for me. My own involvement actually in the COSH movement, as it's called, for worker health and safety, dates back to the late 70s when I was a worker at risk in my first job after college. Along with fellow employees at an upstate university research lab, we were repeatedly exposed in the workplace to hazardous chemicals and pre-market pesticides because the research facility had a flawed and improperly designed ventilation system. Some of my fellow workers became ill with acute respiratory conditions, while others suffered permanent lung damage from exposure. And we met with and received support and technical advice from an upstate COSH group in Syracuse. We were able to get OSHA to inspect the facility and ultimately have engineering and design controls implemented, and they were able to fix the design flaws and protect the employees working there. So when I moved back to New York City several years later, the first door I knocked on to offer my volunteer time was at NICOSH. So tonight we're gathered at Cooper Union to shine a spotlight on what must be done to protect ourselves and our co-workers, trade unionists, our trade union brothers and sisters from potential workplace exposures to elevated levels of radon and natural gas. And it's been discussed how the shale will get into New York City via the various pipelines. So I'll just skip that. Along with increased exposure for New York City residents, other sectors of the population will have additional exposures to radiation from radon and its progeny. For example, workers performing maintenance on the natural gas distribution systems will be exposed to additional radon from polonium when they remove pipes, valves, flanges, and other equipment, or clean scale from the inside of the equipment. And workers in the subway and other subterranean spaces will have greater exposure when ambient radon levels in the outside air increase, as Liz just mentioned. When professions at risk and other professions at risk here in New York City include workers in building maintenance and the hotel trades, including building superintendents, custodians, and handymen, and porters in residential and commercial buildings who work on gas-fired boilers, heating system maintenance and repair, custodians who work at the Board of Education, who maintain public school heating systems that use gas-fired appliances, building maintenance staff in New York City hotels that are heated by gas, utility workers at firms like Con Edison and National Grid, and the smaller businesses they subcontract to that do pipeline infrastructure projects, along with pipe fitters, welders that work on structural steel for pipeline maintenance and repair. I mean, this is a really long list of people who are potentially exposed. And then, as Heather has clearly talked about, chefs and restaurant workers all across the 5 boroughs in restaurants, hotels, and other institutional food provision locations. You know, and we have some sobering statistics on occupational health already in this country. Almost 4,693 workers were killed on the job in 2011, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 206 of them here in New York State. That's an average of 13 workers every day die on the job. That's 13 too many. An estimated 50,000 people die from occupational diseases in the United States, and there's an additional 7.6 million to 11.4 million job injuries and illnesses. In fact, in New York State alone, there were 232,000 injuries and illnesses in 2011. And the cost of this, just injuries and illnesses alone, is enormous. It's estimated to be $250 billion to $300 billion a year. Less than 2 weeks ago, the National Council on Occupational Safety and Health, we commemorated Workers' Memorial Day here in New York and across the country. We were actually, NYCOSH was joined by Congressmember Jerry Nadler, the New York City Central Labor Council, local trade unions, and concerned community members to honor the memory. We lost 75 New Yorkers in 2012. We don't want to continue to mourn when we can organize. The harsh lessons of residential and workplace exposures to toxics like lead or asbestos should inform our discussion and after-event organizing tonight. David Rossner and Gerald Markowitz's seminal book, Deceit and Denial, The Deadly Politics of Industrial Pollution, documents attempts by chemical and lead industries to suppress the scientific and medical evidence about lead and to deceive Americans about the dangers that their deadly products presented to workers, the public, and consumers. The hazards of exposure to radon are well documented, as has been discussed, in both the medical and scientific community worldwide. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, along with EPA, have classified radon as a Class A human health carcinogen because of the wealth of biological and epidemiological evidence and the data that show the connection between exposure to radon and lung cancer in humans. There is no uncertainty here about it, and we need to ensure that the strongest safety and health protections are in place for workers and the public. We can't be canaries. The greedier employers about us are already trying to pay us in birdseed, or we can be proactive. I'm not growing feathers. I intend to evaluate the shale gas and force this industry to account for itself before being silenced. Let's do it now. Thank you.
Actually, I encourage you to get emotional. I think the prospect of radon with your coffee is one I can certainly get very emotional about.